Mr. President, I rise today in support of a woman's right to control her own body. Across the country, women have been stripped of the freedom to make their own decisions, decisions about their families, their health, and their futures. Judges and politicians have inserted themselves into exam rooms, telling doctors they cannot treat their patients, sometimes even if that treatment would save her life. In my home state of Wisconsin, women lived for 15 months under a criminal abortion ban that was passed in 1849, a law on the books from 1 year after our statehood and 70 years before a woman won the right to vote. And while there were no women in the room when the statute was crafted, 2 years ago, Wisconsin women woke up to find their health care decisions would be dictated by a law that predates the Civil War. They woke up to find out that they now had fewer rights than their mothers and their grandmothers. That day began 15 months of confusion and chaos and heartbreak for families across Wisconsin. We heard stories of women bleeding out from miscarriages, developing life-threatening infections, or being forced to carry unviable pregnancies until they could find an appointment out of state. For countless women, that meant driving hours, paying for lodging and childcare, and taking time off work, just to make their own decisions about their own body. Patients from every one of Wisconsin's 72 counties traveled to Illinois just to access health care, some traveling over 500 miles. Prior to the Dobbs decision, only 1 in 6 Wisconsin abortion patients received out-of-state care. During our criminal abortion ban, that number skyrocketed to 9 out of 10 patients seeking care out of state. Those families were being forced to drive, on average, 103 minutes to exercise their right to control their own bodies and get the care they needed, nearly double the time that they drove to access care before Roe fell. And I'm talking here about women who could afford the more than $1,000 in costs to access that care. We must also be aware of those who could not. For example, patients traveling from out of state had to fork up an average of $330 just for lodging. In 2023 alone, Illinois and Minnesota providers saw over 6,000 patients from Wisconsin. You heard me right, 6,000 Wisconsin women were forced to travel sometimes hundreds of miles just to access health care. And even though Wisconsin has restored access to abortion in 3 counties, Planned Parenthood of Illinois is still seeing 3 times as many patients from Wisconsin compared to before the Dobbs decision came down. The reality is that abortion care is still only available in 3 of our 72 counties. Exercising this fundamental freedom is out of reach for far too many in America. 22 states across the country have abortion bans, and that means 1 in 3 women of reproductive age live in a state where they cannot get the health care they need because politicians are telling them that they know better. Well, women and families deserve better. That is why last year I introduced the Reproductive Health Travel Fund Act to give millions of women without access to care in their home states a lifeline. This bill would ease the tremendous financial burden Republican abortion bans have placed squarely on women who are trying to access critical care. Women are spending hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars to pay for travel, lodging, meals, and childcare just to make their own health care decisions. These past 2 years, we've heard shocking stories of women, often desperate for help, having nowhere to turn. Last week, we even heard the story of a woman who died because she was denied abortion care until it was too late. If my colleagues insist that this issue is a decision for the states and not for women, then I hope that they can at least recognize the tremendous hardship their patchwork of laws has created. The rights you have as an American should not depend upon what state you live in. If we cannot restore Roe this Congress, we should, at the very least, extend a lifeline to the millions of women who are unable to access care in their own communities. So, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions be discharged from further consideration of S. 2152, the Reproductive Health Travel Fund Act, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Senator from Alabama.
Reserving the right to object. Mr. President, if my Democrat colleagues were honest, they'd call this bill what it really is, the Elective Abortion Travel Slush Fund for All Act. This bill authorizes $350 million taxpayer dollars for radical abortion groups to facilitate elective abortions. And this money isn't limited to Americans. It would also give taxpayer money to non-citizens, illegal aliens who are seeking abortions. This bill would use federal funds to cover the cost of flights, food, hotels, and other expenses for any individual in the United States seeking abortion paid for by the American taxpayers. It would even cover lost wages for those traveling to get abortion. $50 million of the taxpayer money in this bill would go directly to groups like Planned Parenthood to pay for advertising, website development, increasing staff, and building maintenance and construction, all of which will go to encouraging, if not coercing, women to get abortions, not to seek alternatives. Now, there's a major inconvenient fact that Senate Democrats are ignoring. The Hyde Amendment is clear. No taxpayer funds may be used for abortion. My colleagues will say, well, none of this money is paying for abortions. But let's be clear. This taxpayer money is being used for one purpose, to take the lives of unborn children. While the actual abortion procedures aren't covered by this bill, it covers every other cost associated with ensuring abortions happen. Democrats know the Hyde Amendment prevents and prohibits federal dollars funding abortions. It's been the law of the land for 48 years. It was democratically agreed to then, and it still stands today. Still, today, 60% of voters agree with the Hyde Amendment on both sides of the aisle that taxpayer dollars should not be used for abortions. I'm sure that percentage is even higher for illegals getting taxpayer money for abortions. But Democrats really don't care. Despite what they say, they'll override American voters if democracy gets in the way of their latest left-wing pet project. Democrats know states have democratically decided what their laws on abortions are. Now, they're trying to override the will of the people and the will of the states by using federal government and millions of taxpayer dollars to achieve their goal. This is not only to counter to the spirit of the Hyde Amendment, it is contrary to the principles of federalism and the will of the American people. As I pointed out for months last year with a similar illegal abortion policy Secretary Lloyd Austin implemented at the Department of Defense, no agency is above the law. I called out the VA for implementing another illegal abortion policy. This bill is just another page out of the Democrats' same extreme abortion playbook. This bill is a flimsy attempt to go around the law of the land. Gone are the days of the Democrats saying abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Democrats today want dangerous, illegal, and limitless abortions at any cost to the American taxpayers. So for that reason, Mr. President, I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from Wisconsin.
I am disappointed with the objection. I will agree with the senator on one point, which is that this bill does not fund abortion. The senator referred to democratically passed laws relating to this subject. And I just want to remind him once more what I said at my opening statement. In Wisconsin, women lived for 15 months under a criminal abortion ban that was passed in 1849, 70 years before women had the right to vote, before the Civil War. Obviously, women had no input in that democratically enacted law. But this bill simply breaks down a barrier that Americans are facing to access sometimes life-saving care. A financial barrier, I might add, that Republicans put up when they inserted themselves into our exam rooms and into women's personal decisions. I hope my Republican colleagues understand that women take notice when you vote down bills that protect and defend their basic freedoms. They see who is fighting for their right to control their bodies, health, families, and future. I'm proud to be standing here today on their behalf. This issue is not going away. We're going to keep fighting day in and day out because women want their rights and freedoms back. Some of my colleagues are claiming that this is merely a messaging bill. Well, send Americans the message that you support their decisions to make their own health care choices and pass this bill into law. I yield.